Okay, guys, welcome to our Compliance Conversations hosted by ILSA and the folks here at Spot On Insurance. Today, we'll be discussing staffing your compliance team from zero knowledge to expert in the field. This is the last of this series. In fact, this is our last webinar of 2020. And we can sit back for the next 2 months and either party or just prepare for new webinars that are going to come up for next year. Think Tank.
Oh my goodness. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is going to be a 1-hour session and we are streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. If you have questions, just type them up in the Q&A section. If you just want to say hello, you could put it in the chat.
Yes. Let's introduce our panelists. We've got Joanne Delgado. Oh, is Joanne here? I didn't see her.
She's supposed to be here.
Joanne Delgado should be here momentarily. She's the Vice President of Compliance and Education at the SILA-F California. Ngozi Nnaji, Principal at AKO Insurance Consulting. Ben Volkmer, Director of Client Services at Questpro Consultants. Diana Capes, Executive Vice President of SILA. Welcome. Safiya Reid, Director in Diversity and Inclusion, Pure Insurance. Where are you today, Safiya?
St. Thomas.
Oh, St. Thomas.
60 miles away from Puerto Rico.
The United States is getting cold, so she ran off. Christa Rapoport, Senior Vice President and General Counsel, Insurance Care Direct. Angela Hatchell, Deputy Commissioner of Agent Services Division at the North Carolina Department of Insurance. Welcome. And Sarah Ribbens, AVP Compliance Manager, Pure Insurance.
And from our ILSA team, we've got several folks.
Kristy Roberts of Licensing and Compliance, Lorenzo Houston of Surplus Lines Taxes, Sabrina Slater of Annuals and Corporates, Christian Masonette from our Spot On Insurance team, handling any mishaps coming up today. And Joyce King.
And at the helm of it all on our day-to-day is Russ Foster, our General Manager, and Joyce King, our Special Projects Administrator, and she will be our webinar moderator and keeping the conversation going and making us laugh and have fun during talking about compliance, even though we always can have fun talking about compliance, right, Joyce?
Absolutely.
So Joyce, give us a little recap on some of the things that we've covered in parts 1 and 2.
Parts 1 and part 2. Okay, so in part 1, we discussed recruiting new team members. Yeah. We talked about how to attract and engage new team members. We discussed challenges that maybe some of us face as we're recruiting.
Yeah, definitely, because some of us are in very small markets. Some of us are in big markets. The big markets have, of course, the competition of lots of employment opportunities. The small markets, like where we are, population of 5,000, you're never going to find someone with a compliance background. So that's why we put together this webinar, because we have a lot of experience in putting together top-notch people that become experts in the field after they've been hired on with having zero knowledge.
Right. We have covered onboarding new team members and training, and we've heard from several of our panelists kind of different ways that everyone handles the onboarding and the training. We have talked about diversity and inclusion in the insurance industry. Mm-hmm. We have talked about training and cross-training for heavy volume. We covered that in part 2. In fact, that was all of part 2. We really went pretty hard and heavy on how to train and how to prepare your staff for certain times of heavy volume. We even talked about heavy volume around mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, we talked about heavy volume also in the case of Angela, when they have open enrollment at the insurance commissioner's office in North Carolina, what we have to do, like we have to have backup staff. And one of the other things that I know a lot of the panelists loved was when we introduced our concept of the Wheel of Fortune, right? Where we got our people to get out of their comfort zones and learn other areas that they weren't comfortable with. And we put some financial incentives behind that. And that was a real good way to push them out of their comfort zones and get them to learn every aspect of compliance.
Absolutely. So that in a nutshell is what we covered. If you really want to know, you have to go listen to part 1 and 2.
That's right. And so that's on our YouTube channels on Insurance Licensing Services of America and Spot On Insurance on our YouTube channels. So, you know, we all know that getting this expertise, you know, when you're dealing with 54 jurisdictions, U.S. jurisdictions, a lot of folks here, a lot of compliance officers are also over international operations. So you have to have that whole compliance aspect as well. This information, this knowledge doesn't come overnight. It takes a while. So it's so important once you train your folks to be able to keep them, right? So today we're going to be talking about how to keep those folks that you've trained. And also, how do you further develop them? How do you sharpen their skills? So I'm really excited for this. And Joyce, I'll let you take it away.
All righty. So I would like to start my first question with Safiya, please. And actually, we're kind of going to go around to the different panelists too, so be thinking about this, folks. But talk to us about some associations, groups, and things like that that have helped you in your insurance career, and talk to us about any guides, networking, anything that comes to mind that kind of helped further you in your career.
Sure. Well, I owe a ton of credit to a lot of organizations like Inroads that helped really develop my professional career. And so it's hard, and they prepared me for any career, not just anything specific in insurance. And so I feel like I have to give credit to them. But more so in the compliance world, really going to like the surplus lines law groups and signing on for those different surplus lines associations, SILA, and going to their conventions. Those were all really good opportunities. One, to network with people, because you find that once we all get in the same room, you're like, oh, we all speak the same kind of nerdy language. Like, oh, okay, got it. You get, we all freak out over the exact same things. So that was for someone who was relatively, especially compared to the rest of the panel, a newbie to the insurance industry, specifically surplus lines and the compliance world. It was really helpful to be able to join organizations like SILA and surplus lines law groups and other different, like the Western State Surplus Lines conventions, which is actually where I met Arlene and Ted. And so those were all great, not networking opportunities to, talk to other people in the industry, but then also learning opportunities to find out about regulations coming down the line, and of all these other kind of exciting opportunities that could help us make better informed business decisions.
Ngozi, can you talk to us about some networking and associations and anything that's helped you along these roads?
Definitely. Now, I'll have to confess, I'm not in the kind of compliance and surplus lines world, but I've been in the insurance industry for almost 25 years. And I do think that various trade organizations are important. And I think when considering my space right now is kind of diversity and inclusion, I do think connecting your employees with trade organizations that might that might cater to their demographics is also important as well. I think oftentimes we find that, from a retention perspective, especially the diverse talent, do not oftentimes feel a sense of belonging or inclusivity when they're, when they join an organization, and hence that's sometimes the reason that they leave. But you can kind of counter that by, engaging or encouraging them to be a part of networks outside of the four walls of your organization. And organizations like NAIA, the National African Insurance Association, LIA for Latinx, there's KAIA. I mean, there's a variety of different kind of trade organizations that really focus to different racial and cultural demographics. So I think that's important especially for diverse talent to feel kind of a sense of unity and inclusiveness. But I also would say that internally you have your employee resource groups, right, that can help support them internally. So, kind of balancing that out, right? Internal and external, making sure that they have a network that supports them and they can reach out to is very key to retention.
Awesome. So Angela, I know that you are on the regulator side of things, but do you have any input on this?
At the department, we try to do cross training, and then we participate in SILA, and we participate in the in IRIS, Insurance Regulatory Examiners Society, and also a lot's learned at NAIC. And I think when you bring that, when you go to those things and bring it back, as we can't have everyone to travel, it's important to bring that back and kind of have a meeting afterwards and tell them the things that you've learned to help everyone to further. And if you can get handouts and things like that, or encourage people to be on webinars. And I think that's important for our staff as well. I think you get stagnant if you just are doing the same thing all the time and are not trying to grow. Even if it's not that job related, it might help them to further their career, or expand their horizons a bit.
Awesome.
Joyce, can I just make mention of something? Because I think it's important kind of responding to Angela's comment. Because again, a lot of these trade organizations have conferences, national conferences, where you're traveling and you're going kind of, there's expense to that. But I think there's also a lot of these trade organizations that have local chapters that you can be a part of. So to, Arlene's point about the various domiciles and jurisdictions, I think there's an opportunity for you to kind of look at home to see, okay, what organizations can I be involved in? There's the CPCU Society, there's PLUS, there's RIMS, right? That all have different chapters locally that can, to Angela's point, kind of eliminate the need to travel far away to kind of get that networking that you need, but you can do it kind of right here at home where you are domiciled. So I think that's important to look locally first.
And I wonder also, because of the current climate with COVID and everything, we are definitely seeing a lot more of these Zoom webinar, online type training and networking and things that are going on. And, we all hope that this goes away very soon. But even if and when it does, I just wonder if a lot of these organizations may go to some sort of a hybrid, even where they have, you can register and either go and be present and travel and go and be present, but then also maybe there's an opportunity for those who aren't able to travel to still kind of get into these organizations and attend these events online. I think that would be.
I definitely want to bring Diana in on this, because I'll share with you guys something that happened in our family just recently. Obviously, we've been in licensing and compliance for 20-something years. I've known Diana. I've been a member of SILA since 1993, Ted and I. And just recently, a cousin of Ted's, who's out in the East Coast and works for a very large company in compliance, and we've told her, this is like what we do, but she didn't quite really get what we were doing. And she finally got to attend SILA this year. Because their organization is so big, they were very limited as to how many people they could send in the past. And because it was virtual, she was able to attend along with several of her coworkers. And she saw the ILSA and Spot On Insurance ad, and she messaged us, and she's like, "Oh, wow, you guys are real, have a really, really big business." We're like, yeah, we kind of, we've been around for a while. So it was really funny. And I just love that she had the opportunity to now participate at SILA, which for me has been a resource tremendous. When I started compliance licensing for Minette, which was later on bought out by Aon, I didn't have a predecessor. I had to learn it all on my own. And SILA for me was my biggest resource. That's where I learned and I absorbed things as a sponge. I remember when I met Diana, she was with Pictorial at the time, right? So Diana, talk to us about SILA. I know that you guys are just finished the conference. I want to hear about it. I know it was a totally different format. And so tell us about it.
Arlene, you're our best advertising. Thank you.
I mean it all.
SILA, for those of you who don't know the acronym, it's Securities and Insurance Licensing Association, which, if you're speaking about us at dinner time, a lot of people's eyes glaze over, but we do know that there's a lot of you out there who are in our industry. And we've been serving this industry since 1990. And we went independent in 2008 and became our own nonprofit organization. And that's really where I stepped in to lead that. But it's really a great network of industry professionals who serve either in securities or insurance licensing, whether you're a vendor, your industry, or your regulator. If you have any space in this, then you're going to find value in, talking, exhibiting, sharing information with other industry members across the country. We are countrywide. So this year, it was a challenge, as we all would expect in 2020. Instead of an in-person conference, we had to go virtual, which we want to take a little advantage of that because there are some individuals who have not ever participated in an in-person SILA conference. So we extended our offer for a SILA conference to non-members within an organization that they can actually participate in the SILA conference. And that in itself grew our attendees from like 700 to 1,130 attendees. Isn't that great?
That is awesome.
That is awesome. So the marketing of the benefits of SILA, just extended itself just in that offer, right? So when we go back to those individuals who don't hold a SILA conference or SILA membership, we say, would you like one? At least they know who SILA is. But I know that for those of you, who attended the SILA conference, thank you. We did have a long conference. If you were to look at the time frame of October 1 through October 21st, that seems so long. But what we tried to do was restrict the SILA conference sessions to just the afternoon so that people can still work and still do other, things that they need to have done on their plates as far as, work commitments. But it really did work out pretty well. And we also offered this year to, we didn't have exhibitors this year in our SILA conference that we're love to have, welcome our SILA conference attendees, but we offered to our exhibitors a sponsorship where they can actually do a presentation of the products and services that they provide. And I know that was so well received. And ILSA, thank you for being that. And I hate to not go without acknowledging and congratulating the ILSA team on winning the Organization of the Year award.
Yeah, we did.
Conference, so great job, guys. I saw enthusiasm come in when that award was presented, and well deserved.
Thank you. Real quickly, and I know we've got other questions to get to, but I still want to hear from Ben, Christa, Sarah, Joanne about some of the organizations. Of course, we've covered. Yes, and I'll definitely get to ILSA as well. But we've heard SILA a few times. We've heard Surplus Lines Law Group. Do you have some more, Ben? I'll start with you. Do you have any more organizations that you can kind of throw out to our audience today? And if you've mentioned an organization, panelists, if you don't mind, just kind of go mention it in the chat like Safiya did. She talked to us about what En-ROADS stood for, because I would have had to ask. So I'm glad she did that.
Thank you.
When I'm networking in compliance, the AICP is where I go usually first and foremost. The leadership and fellowship there tends to be great. What I'll say about associations in general, I've been around them and participating in them for more than a decade across underwriting, loss control, claims, compliance, you name it. And I think what's most important is to keep showing up and volunteer. A lot of people, you know, they'll just kind of moonlight, or they'll go once a quarter, and you just don't get a lot of value out of it that way. You really have to keep sitting down and keep introducing yourself, and the connections you make and the exposure you get is just incredible for the time and money you're actually putting into it. And, you know, we'd love to see people doing it across all parts of insurance earlier in their careers. You know, people wait until they have management jobs and no time to volunteer a lot of times to take on those posts and committees. And some of those are the best ways to connect yourself to people and create long-term connections outside your organization a lot of the time.
Thank you. Christa, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, so glad to be here today, Joyce and team. There's some things that I think, especially as an attorney, is immersing yourself in the lingo. I recall when I first entered the industry, I was sent every month to an industry conference. Now that's easier in a non-COVID situation, but going to our 3 or 4 day conferences and hearing speakers and hearing the information was very good. Some of my favorites are conferences by Eleni, the Excess Lines Association of New York. They have a great website. They have great regional meetings, and they look towards, even though it's a New York organization for surplus lines, which is called Excess Lines in New York, they look to solidifying understanding in the industry. And many of their executives are retirees from the New York Department of Financial Services. So that was one area. Of course, we've all mentioned SILA and ASIP, but another great area is the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And there are quarterly meetings as well as commissioners' fly-ins and other meetings, and going to those and following the committees that are relevant for your segment of the industry is very helpful. On the NAIC.org, there are position papers and there's committees, everything from property and casualty to licensing to producers, artificial intelligence, which is something I'm following closely. And so when you can learn, get the background, so then when you join the public meetings, because some meetings are regulator only, that's a great way to learn. And even the best place to learn is in the hallways. You meet so many people. So that is a great way. Then there are areas like certain law firms. We're very fortunate that a huge portion, because there's so many global insurers in New York market, we have great law firms like Strook, which have breakfast meetings, and you used to be able to go pop into Strook for an hour before heading to the office. And they have these online now. So take advantage of NAIC and of Strook. And then finally, there's people like the FORCE, the Federation of Regulatory Counsel. Now, most of those are law firms. What's interesting is you can learn from them, but really to meet all the in-house folks, most of the time that's at the NAIC. We all collect and meet with one another and we share tips, because it's very different being inside an insurance licensee as opposed to being in a law firm where you have one-off projects or huge projects that are too much for inside folks to handle. Hope that helps.
Very Absolutely. Good. Lorenzo, you're next.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of different organizations that have been brought up already, a lot of great organizations that, we at ILSA have been involved with. Speaking to the point that was kind of made earlier, I do want to stress that there is a big importance of looking for your local, local organizations that may exist. Speaking of SILA, there is a local chapter that's roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours from here. Texas also has the TSLA, which is very important in establishing and kind of giving a pulse of what's going on in Texas surplus lines, specifically Texas surplus lines market. But there's also there's also more like the independent insurance agents of Houston, so there's really a lot specifically focused groups on, for that state by state have their own different groups. So, it's really important to kind of look for those local groups, because it's, if you don't have the time to get out, 2 or 3 or 4 days at a time, you could take a day trip and, and connect that way as well.
That's right. Sarah.
Sure. The Surplus Lines Law Group was just a really fabulous way for me to get to know people in the industry. Even though I've been doing it for a lot of years, it was nice to meet a whole lot of other people. I also want to make sure I mention the WSIA. We haven't mentioned them yet, I don't think. The Wholesale and Specialty Insurance Association. They have a lot of resources on their website, and John Meets and Carrie Kish are really great, advocates, and they do a lot of lobbying on the industry's behalf in Washington and with the various states. They were real instrumental in getting the lingering states who had their multi-state rate calculation rules removed. So they're always really good people to kind of be in touch with. And then along the lines of the Surplus Lines Law Group, they've had the Western State Surplus Lines Conference that I've been to a couple of years, and it's largely the same people, but it's also another great way to network. And one of the other things that I really value is all the states with stamping offices, because they exist to help the brokers get it right. And if you call the question, they're not going to tell the state on you, right? So they're there to help make sure you get it right. So they're always a great resource to network with. So those are my extra thoughts.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, my friend Joanne Delgado from California, who I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of podcasts with lately. Let's hear from you. You yourself are an awesome resource for me.
I think everyone has covered like all of the ones I would think of, but what I do want to really mention and use very frequently, especially these days as a resource, is the ILSA and Spot On website. So I'm going to bring those in because there's so much information that's available. And we do actually refer people. So, in the Education and Compliance Department, we'll get a lot of questions from new filers, really looking for basic information. And where I came from a 51 jurisdiction brokerage background, a lot of times I can't honestly tell you I remember the tax rate in Idaho for 1997. But what I can do is I can share the information that ILSA and Spot On make available, not only on their websites, but as well in the podcasts, because there have been so many, and it's been such a pleasure to be involved with those and meet so many smart people. So
thank you, Joanne. Thank you. And that, again, it reminds me that this is our last webinar. And I think back to March when we started these webinars, and I actually got the idea. I stole it from Safiya. She was having, I told her about it one day. She was having an in-house compliance session for her team for training. And I said to Ted, oh my gosh, it's the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone's getting locked down. We're not going to be able to go to the Surplus Lines Law Group in April. How will we, stay in touch with all of our friends? And so that's how we gave birth to these webinars. And I feel so fortunate that we've been able to connect during these last couple of months. Joanne has been on our podcast and our webinars. She's been a regular, and just to be able to connect like that and to just have the resources, a lot of people have been sharing resources on the webinar, and I'm very grateful for that. And the fact that we were able to connect a lot of people. I know a lot of panelists have reached out to other panelists, and that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And for us, it's all about sharing knowledge. We've been in this industry for such a long time, developed the business here, and this is kind of giving back so that people know where to go, where to find all the resources. And it's not like we're competing for anyone. You know, we're not competing for anyone. Hey, I got more knowledge than you, are going back and forth with that kind of nonsense. We're just all out sharing whatever you need. And if we don't have it, if our folks at ILSA don't have that information for you, they know where to get it for you.
Because the thing is, right, we all started with zero knowledge, right? We all started with zero knowledge. And it's, you know, when I see our team and the incredible knowledge that they have now, I'm like, oh my gosh, and the processes that they have in place, I'm like, holy cow, to think back, you know, to maybe 15 years ago when Kristy started, or Sabrina. It comes, you know, after a period of time and going to conferences, it definitely comes about.
And Joanne, we fully understand what you're saying, because it's the same thing with us. We're kind of removed from that day to day. So if people ask us those questions, we know exactly where to send them to our folks at ILSA, because their feet are on the ground every day. You know, they're doing this 5 days a week and in touch with everybody in the United States. So they really are a true gem when it comes to getting those questions answered.
I want to say, I hope that all of our attendees are really watching this chat right now, because we're sharing so many of these organizations in the chat. Diana has extended the invitation that anybody that wants to join SILA to get with her. She's provided her email address there. And we already have one question that's come in through the Q&A, and I'll get to that one in a minute. But I want to take our next question real quick to Diana Capes with SILA, and it's something that that I've heard you say before. I've heard you mention this before, so I'd like for you to just kind of explain this to our listeners. But I've heard you talk about how licensing and compliance specialists can actually use their roles to launch them into other positions. So kind of talk to us about what you mean by that.
Well, you know, when you first start into insurance licensing and securities registration professions, you're like, oh, where can I go from here? But there's a lot of places you can go from there, because if you think about it, you are controlling, you know, the launching of an insurance producer's career. You're launching securities registration profession, but you have to also protect the company that you work for. And so there's a lot of responsibilities in this role that you are in. And so if you were to, you know, take that position on, build on it through, you know, courses and credentials that further, you know, provide, I guess, what you want to say, credentials to your name and to your profession, then when you speak at a meeting, people are going to be listening. So there is a lot of compliance factors to this role. There's a lot of importance to this role. And so we want to draw attention to that we can't leave you out there alone. You know, that we do have, you know, if somebody were to say, well, what makes you, you know, an authority on this topic, you will have some backing in this SILA arrangement, as far as just having some of that designation or certification role. And you can say that, you know, and can substantiate your position, and they will stop and they will listen.
Joyce, do you mind if I add on to that? Because I think that's important to highlight, because I think also oftentimes what happens when people come into organizations, and especially if it's an entry level, they don't understand kind of what the career pathing opportunities could be. So I think having that discussion, especially like with the Wheel of Fortune and the different skill sets that can be learned, and really talking about, okay, what are your next steps, you know, 12 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and especially if people coming into the compliance and the surplus lines world know that there's other opportunities potentially, meaning, you know, that they could go as far as career pathing. I think that's an important conversation around retention, because if the individual understands that you're vested in their future and you're vested in career pathing, then they're more likely to stay to see that through, because they know that you're going to support them through those endeavors. So Diana, thank you for mentioning that. I think that's key.
And oftentimes a licensing specialist, a compliance specialist, gets to interact not only with the marketing department, but with the legal department. So there are other opportunities there. There's also the opportunity of going into becoming a regulator, being at the insurance departments, or a regulatory body, a Secretary of State. So there's a lot of paths that open up with this type of position. There's so many different things that, you can go into.
That, and they can even transition into becoming an insurance producer themselves.
Right.
Or an adjuster.
Right.
Either.
It just for me, I started off with an administrator in a company. And I was, just an administrator. And you do continue to grow. And it doesn't mean that you're staying in the department. There are different outreaches. And so look where I'm at now, right? So I'm working for an organization, an association that addresses the compliance insurance licensing throughout the country. So hang in there, guys. There's a lot of opportunity.
I think
hang in there and keep learning. Go ahead, Safiya.
Yeah, I think one of the other avenues that I'm not sure I've heard explored today is really on the technology and innovation side. If you would have told me at the beginning of this year that I would have been utilizing robotics process automation and creating our first bot to kind of aid in the compliance process internally, I would have said, what's RPA? So the fact that it was such an intuitive technology and to easily implement by just identifying kind of some areas that obviously, and across the board in insurance, there's definitely some room to make up there on the technological front. And so being able to utilize those types of technologies is just not an area that I would have thought about in the compliance world.
Wow.
This is Christa. I echo that because I say to my teams, every company today is a technology company. We are 100% remote. Our processes that work that way. We're using technology to enhance what we're doing. Some of it includes AI, because AI is just a tool. But learning how technology impacts how you market, how you monitor. These are all things that are very helpful. And fortunately, someone asked something about free resources. That's an area that NAIC has for free, and you can find some of the principles there. Of course, there's no substitute to actual working in a team. Another question was, what can you learn all this for offline and on your own? And you can learn some technical things, but so much requires a mentor. And that's something that I think, we should discuss.
Absolutely. So the question that came in the Q&A, and I'll read this out loud to everybody. Is there a way to become a licensing and compliance specialist without investing any money?
Come to work for us.
No.
Funny.
So a lot of it is you learn on your own. Like a client will pose a question to you, and then you may not have any idea what the answer is, but you have to call the DOI, usually California or New York, because they have the most stringent compliance requirements. And then you ask them that question, and then they're going to ask about, well, what about these other states? So you start a guide and you build a guide, and then one guide turns into two guides, and then it becomes a database, and then you store all your knowledge in that database, and that's where you start honing your knowledge and experience in that.
So I would also like to add to that, because I see that this person is looking for any free resources. Mm-hmm. And I think back to, how I started. It was trial and error, a lot like what Kristy is saying, calling up the DOIs and the Secretary of States and getting the answers from them. But also a plug for us, Spot On Insurance, we do have a series of episodes that are just compliance do's and don'ts. So we talk about specifically licensing, just
name changes,
changes, DBAs, all of that stuff. So I almost forgot about that.
Those are free.
Yes, they are. And those are very valuable.
Yeah, so those are free. Like we mentioned before, we have a lot of resources on the ILSA website, a lot of PDFs and whatnot also on Spot On Insurance available. But listen to podcasts, read, make sure that you're getting the business insurance alerts. There are free resources, but you also have to look at how to invest in yourself. What courses, what memberships, what organizations can you be a part of? I've learned so much from just being part of the Surplus Lines Law Group, going to SILA. So, but there are some free
I think you're
resources.
right, Arlene. I think it depends on where you want to go. At a certain point, you're going to have to invest in yourself and put your money where, hey, this is really important to me, because, that's where we spend our money in what we feel is very important to you. So if getting ahead in the insurance industry is important to you, at some point you're going to have to,
I do have a suggestion for you, though. Just because you may not be able to afford it, ask your company, because that's exactly what Ted and Arlene did for us. I wanted to get my SILA associate designation, and I was already a SILA member, and I looked into it and I took it to them and I was like, can you allow me to do, or would you allow me to do this, and would you pay for it? Because we pay for continuing education here. And they were like, yeah, sure. So I did that. So while you may not be able to afford it, ask your company, because it's an investment for them as well, because they know you now have that knowledge. You're an asset, and you're going to build on that knowledge with time, just like I was talking about with the guides. You're creating those guides and you're inputting that information and you're retaining portions of it. But that you're going to be that much more valuable to your company by looking at designations and things like that. So
great point, Kristy. Great point.
Yeah.
And I'll also give a plug for ourselves, because we do have online compliance guides, courses that we are launching. They're not free, but they are available, and you can sign up to get on the waiting list.
Yeah, and ask your company about getting them to pay for the courses. 100%. Yeah.
And I was just going to mention that in the motivation behind us creating those courses are from people just like you who have asked this question: how can I learn? Do you teach this thing, ILSA? Which ILSA doesn't bring you in and teach you how to do that. but Spot On has taken the initiative to say, you know what, I think we need to put some courses together. There are people out there that are hungry for this information. They want to learn how to do this. And we've certainly got plenty of knowledge between Spot On and ILSA to be able to put these together.
And the other thing is, of course, we mentioned in the last webinar, our boot camp. So started to get some private messages. People were like, can we sign up for the 2-week boot camp?
Can we do your boot camp?
Oh.
I'm seeing a marketing opportunity here. We actually, because of the virus, we've had some new hires during, the things that we have to accommodate. So we're bringing in new people. We don't want a whole bunch of people crammed into a classroom together that haven't been around each other. And so we have a DIY version, a self-study program of our boot camp. So,
another point is management should easily recognize that it is vitally important to their pocketbook that they get regulatory compliance right. So if you're in regulatory compliance, that's a way to sell the idea. Hey, spend a little money here. We get all this knowledge here, and we get it right. And in the end, you're not getting fined. It's this tremendous savings of money on the other end. Not only
I agree, Ted. That is beautiful point. Return on investment is huge in an insurance or a securities company, right? If you have an attendee, if you have an individual who's working for your company who's well versed in what the compliance issues are, they are an asset. So don't ever sell yourself short. You are worth a SILA membership, or you are worth that course, or you are worth that training to get to where you are going to be an asset to that organization. So definitely ask.
Yes, yes. And we're going to put a link to our courses on here. Here's just a little, the landing page of our free course, but we'll put a link on the chat on where you can go to sign up for the course.
Yes, we will.
And we managed to muzzle Arlene. That was no trick.
But I'm still live.
All right. So I want to say at this point, we are 45 minutes in, and do you know we've only gotten to 2 of my questions? So we're going to move on.
Hey, Joyce, real quick. Tina had asked for a copy of the Wheel of Fortune. I put a note in the chat. If you will send me your email or put your email address here on the chat, I'll send you a copy of mine, which is the licensing, compliance, onboarding, and sales wheel. It's massive, but it's an idea of what we go through down here in our department.
So to the individual who asked about the training and the resources, of course, I think if somebody's mentioned it passed me up, but a mentor. Find a mentor. And that's actually the kind of the next question that's on my agenda here. And it's to Ngozi, and talk to us about how important mentors are in this world. If I could spit it out.
I mean, mentors are huge. I mean, I think they become a critical component to professional development. Yes. I think mentors can give insight as into kind of the how in which to do things, can give you, constructive criticism and feedback as far as kind of your professional journey. But I do, I'm always careful to mention that, mentorship should not be forced. I think part of mentorship is this understanding that, not everybody's going to click, and all because that, you find someone or have identified someone that you potentially want to be mentored by does not mean that they're automatically the best mentor for you. So I think you do have to do your homework, you have to do your research. And I think both parties have to be committed to moving the relationship forward. Because if you have a mentor who's not committed to your development, then what good is that mentor? Right. And so you have to make sure that you're articulating kind of what you're asked as a mentee, what you're looking for. What are you looking for them to mentor you with? Right? Because you can have a professional mentor, a personal mentor, whatever the case might be, or a mentor in a very specific area. But I think you need to be able to articulate that, and the mentor needs to be able to understand that. And there's an exchange that happens there. And I think it's really critical, and it's really important if you're looking for mentorship in terms of moving to the next stage in your professional development. I think those are key components to kind of, career pathing. So I'm a big proponent for mentorship, but doing it wisely is the key.
Absolutely.
And Ngozi, I'd like to add one piece to that, just because we're having mentorship. One has been huge for me. I'm not where I am without those type of mentorship relationships, Arlene and Ted being one of them as well. And so what Pure Insurance, we piloted a one-on-one mentorship program within the organization. And I got to be honest, it kind of fizzled a bit, but it was kind of similar to what you said. Just because someone has similar interests, it's so difficult to get it's essentially like a relationship almost, like it has to work both ways. And so for that regard, we remixed it, and we're doing like these mentorship pods that we're getting ready to pilot at the top of the year. And so it'll be 3 or 4 people aligned interests, and then 1 person that's signed up to be a leader. And we're hoping that that group will provide kind of more of an opportunity to be able to keep it going and keep the momentum there. But ultimately, I think, you know, organizations like NAYA, LAYA, other like identity-based insurance trade organizations, those are all great places to start establishing those relationships because ultimately it is difficult to find a mentor within your organization. But I think what it's a lot easier is to find a champion or an advocate for you, that is just going to speak up for you and champion you in places where you don't necessarily may not have access to it at the given moment. So I think there's a way to do both. I have been blessed at Pure to have some really strong champions for me that really advocated for me in those spaces. And that helped my career trajectory and mobility. But I still, but those are completely separate from a mentorship relationship with like Arlene or someone else that, you know, has a much more personal relationship.
Right, and you're totally right on all counts, because I think with mentorship, I firmly believe mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is at a higher level than you. I have mentors that are kind of, you know, we're at the same level, or who are maybe entry level. I do have generationally some, you know, Gen Z mentors.
Yeah, that's the reverse mentoring. We all learn.
Exactly. I'm not trying to be stuck, and I'm trying. Right? I mean, but I think that's the awareness for me, right? There's certain areas where I want to grow and develop, and sometimes it's that reverse mentorship that you have to explore. So I think mentorship is, you know, kind of 360 degrees. It can be all around you, and you just have to be aware of it when you're starting to approach. What do you need mentorship in?
And I have to say, further what Ngozi said, I learned how to use 2 new types of software. One, Trello for task management, which a 19-year-old showed me. And then I learned a really good way to make use of notes and other tracking things for project management. So I just happened to look and think, wow, what are you doing? Can you show me how? And it's been brilliant.
But you have access to really good skills because you have a son at MIT.
That's true.
You should have led with that first.
Yeah. Wait, I might need to use your text mentor then.
He's home. Yes, he's home this semester and he's redoing everything, our mesh networks, all this stuff, and bugging me every day more than I want to know.
But it's a good point. It's a good point that for both of you, that mentorship, it's not necessarily you looking up. You can learn from anyone, anywhere.
Lorenzo, I want to move to you real quick. Talk to us then about the power of friendships and networking. And, you know, if that's kind of somebody's weakness, you know, how can they work on that? How can they shore up in that area, the power of networking? I know I used to struggle with it. I think I remember the days you used to struggle with it. We've come a long way since then, but yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think people who know me now, a lot of people on the call do know me, it'd probably be a surprise to them if I told them that I'm actually an introvert. But when I leave here, when I'm not in front of everyone, I actually enjoy spending my time alone. So it was something that I had to learn, you know, to kind of get comfortable getting out in front of people and speaking in front of people, speaking to people that you've never met before. So, you know, for insurance, you can kind of look at insurance as being little but big, right? Mm-hmm. So insurance is huge. You need insurance for everything, but it's very specialized, you know, it's very, very specialized. And then when you get to compliance, it gets niche. And then when you get to surplus lines or licensing, it gets even more niche. So, what ends up happening is when you start to network and you start to go to these conferences, you start to notice that you're seeing a lot of the same people. You start recognizing people from a conference you attended before. I have made tons and tons of connections with people from SILA. And speaking of niche, you have, we'll use SILA as an example. You have SILA, and then you have surplus lines, and you have the surplus line steering committee. So, I mean, you're starting to talk about something going from this like this, which is insurance, to focusing down and filtering down. So, I mean, you really start to see a lot of the same people. You get to really kind of get personal and share a lot of things that have helped each other, a lot of different tools that have helped each other. You know, a lot of people on the steering committee, when I was involved with it, became real good resources for different things. If I had a question that I didn't know, I could reach out to them, and they can reach out to one of their contacts. So it kind of became a great tool for resources in networking. And I mean, you know, I've learned a lot from ILSA. I've learned a lot from being involved in SILA and from the people that I was involved with. And I mean, tons of different things come from networking, right? So I actually had the opportunity, an employment opportunity from networking with some of the people, specifically people from SILA. Now that wasn't the intention, but that is how it ended up ultimately. So regardless if that's really something that you're looking for, you may be very, very comfortable in your role, which I was, and I definitely am at the time. I definitely am right now. Networking, there's tons of different benefits to networking. I mean, you don't have to be looking for, thinking about down the line if you're looking for another employment opportunity. You can tap into those resources of people that you meet, whether it's different guides they have access to. Maybe they have different tools that can benefit you in your day-to-day work. I mean, there's just tons and tons of benefits to networking. And likewise, a lot of the friendships and networking that I have done is the reason why I am back at ILSA. You know, I have, with many of the people here, I built a strong connection. So I did do my roundabouts. I went to, you know, much larger companies, and I ended up coming back. I mean, and that was basically due to the, you know, the relationships that I was able to build here. So, I mean, there's tons of benefits to stepping outside your comfort zone. You owe it to yourself. I mean, really look at it as an investment in yourself personally, regardless of, again, if it's for you know, opportunities in, you know, in another area, or if it's for personal development and honing your skills to better suit yourself in the role that you're in. You owe it to yourself.
Absolutely.
I want to tag onto that, Lorenzo. You know, we talked about this yesterday too. When we're talking, how do you retain people? One of the big factors is have a culture that attracts people and makes them want to stay, or in the case of many of our employees, come back. Because money is important. We got to pay our bills, but people want to work someplace where they enjoy working, where it doesn't seem like work. And if you can do that, if you can enhance their employment experience to the point where not only will they come back if they leave, but you know they'll talk you up to other people. We get clients from ex-employees that talk us up. So it's really important to, and especially now where, you know, we're in an environment. We talked a lot early in this series about how do you attract talent, and we're in a small place. But you know what? I can go on Indeed right now, and I can get some talent that doesn't live here. If I'm willing to pay New York wages, if that's where they're at, I can find people that will work for me that will never be in this building. And it's the same for people that are working here. If they decide they don't like what ILSA is all about, they can go out there and they can find a place where they can still work from home and have a better experience. So you're competing now with people that were never your competition for those employees.
Yeah. And so for a lot of the attendees that are here that are listening to this webinar today, I would like to share that if you are new to compliance, look at some of the stories of of our team. Like, look at Lorenzo. Lorenzo comes from a very small town. We are in a Groesbeck is population 5,000. I don't know how big Mahia is, but very small.
6,000.
And 6,000. And Lorenzo came to us, you know, almost out of high school, built a stellar career with us, and had an opportunity to go work for a very large company, US Risk, and became the compliance director globally. So he went into, you know, a very good, you know, a lot more than what we could pay him. He had great opportunities, and he's back with our team, and he's learned so much. I would just love to do a fun exercise about, I would love for you guys to share with us some of the places that you guys have gotten to travel to because of your licensing and compliance knowledge. So let's start with you, Kristy.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seattle, Atlanta, Orlando. I'm from Florida, so I had been to Orlando before. California, I was at Anaheim, absolutely loved Anaheim. I've been to DC, which, you know, being a veteran, that was very special to me. And for you guys to make that come true, that was amazing. I've been to Indianapolis, I've been to Arizona, to Phoenix. The list is long. So, Kansas, Missouri.
That's a lot of places as a compliance.
I remember Joyce in London once.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, you guys took me to London, and that was an interesting trip. That's an entire webinar alone just to tell the story of the trip.
But we got to spend many, many days out at Lloyd's.
Lloyd's, yeah.
With Joyce out there.
Yeah, I'm pretty jealous about that.
Russ has gotten
Yep. I was fixing to go to that one. Yep, Hawaii.
I wanted to go to Hawaii that year, and I wasn't able to.
I was happy to go.
Yeah, I skipped that one too.
And you've gotten to go to Puerto Rico as well, Russ.
Yeah, but I can't come back.
He got too many tickets while he was here. So Joyce, we're almost at the end of our time. I want to say thank you so much. I want to again reiterate to all of our attendees, continue to listen to podcasts, to read books, to attend conferences virtually now. It's available to more people. You're able to access those things that you might not have been able to have access to before. If we can ever be a resource for you, go ahead and send us a shout out, an email on, you could do it on ccquestions@ilsainc.com. You could send us emails on socialspot@soyteam.com. You can call our compliance specialist at 254-729-8002. And one thing that I did not touch upon is LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn to connect with other insurance professionals. It's such a valuable tool. It's such a great resource for folks. And again, if we can ever help you guys, just let us know. Thank you to all of our panelists for having participated today and the multiple times that you guys are called upon, and you're always there for us. Thank you.
Thank you all. I had so many more questions for you guys, and we've hit our hour. I am so sorry I couldn't get to all of them.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This was a great webinar. Lots of valuable information. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.